I am Dirck Halstead. I have been a photojournalist for all my life, starting when I was 17 years old. I was the youngest photographer ever to work for Life magazine and to cover a war in Guatemala. I worked for UPI for 15 years. I opened the first picture bureau in Saigon for UPI. I went to China with Richard Nixon in 1972, and right after that started as a contract photographer for Time. You know, I have never thought of myself as a great photographer. That's beside the point. What I am is a storyteller. And I have always felt, like I think a lot of the people in this business, that this isn't about how Dirck Halstead sees. This is about how Dirck Halstead fulfilled his responsibility to recording history. Someone asked about what the future of photography, what were photographers going to be, how are they going to be working 10 years from now? And I said, first off, 10 years from now, there will be no photojournalists using a still camera anymore. And you know, like all these friends, oh my God, oh merde, alors. And I said, but you know what? I'm pulling your chain because it's not going to take 10 years. 5 years is much more likely. You know, the people who use 35 millimeter right up until the late 1950s were considered the elite. They were the life photographers, and they were these people called photojournalists. When I started, there was photojournalist, there was no such word. You were a press photographer. I love this picture. It's, first off, you would never see a picture like this today. It's impossible to do, because this was taken in 1968. All these signs, they are made up by volunteers. And all these people here are people who are bussed in, and they're all given the signs as they're bussed in. And this is a picture I took from behind Nixon. Well, you would never get that today simply because you could never get back of them like that. And you notice there's no bulletproof shields or anything. Now, there'll be a bulletproof shield in front of them. And this is such classic Richard Nixon with those fingers. This is his salute that he would use. And this is taken in the last week of the campaign in San Diego. I've been there for 2 presidential assassination attempts. There's the Reagan assassination attempt in Washington, D.C., and the Gerald Ford assassination attempt in San Francisco. There is an out-of-body experience. There's the shot, and your mind processes that like this. It says, you know, that sounds like a shot, but that wouldn't be a shot, because if that were a shot, I'd be taking pictures. And you say, I gotta go. And so you're running at the subject. And actually, I was coming out of the Mayflower Hotel, out of the door, exactly at the moment Hinckley shot Reagan. I ran as fast as I could to the limo, but he had already been pushed in the car, and the car, in fact, my first frame, you see the back fender of the car going out. And this is in the moments immediately after that. And here's the press secretary, James Brady, is down. There's a cop down here. Secret Service is responding. And John Hinckley is back in here, with them grabbing John Hinckley. And these poor people, they work for the hotel, and they just come down to say goodbye to Reagan, and they're like in total shock. There never was before, and I don't think there will ever again be, as important a presidential trip as Richard Nixon's trip to China in 1972. He and Kissinger came up with this idea that if he were able to be invited to China, what would happen if they could get something going? It would totally change the political face of the world. After the trip to China, China stopped supporting North Vietnam, cut them off, and then Russia stopped, and suddenly the whole world balance began to change. And all that happened in 10 days in China. I decided that I was going to cover George H.W. Bush. And I had never met the man. And so this is July '79, and I went down to Houston. He says, "Are you a runner?" And in those days, I actually was. And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Great." He says, "You got your stuff with you?" I'm running backwards taking this picture. He has just run through these people's picnic lunch. This picture was made in 1996, 2 nights before the election. And there was no reason to pay attention to this because nobody knew who Monica Lewinsky was. Absolutely no reason at all. Now we fast forward 18 months, and the story had just come out in the Washington Post, and so I immediately was called by my picture agency, and they said, "Do you have anything like that?" I had a person working with me on another project at that time. Actually, she was the wife of the White House photographer. And I said, "You know, I just have a hunch that I may have seen that picture somewhere." Now, if you want to go through all those transparencies, we're talking about thousands of transparencies. If you want to go through those transparencies, if you find anything, I'll pay you 10% of whatever it sells for. He said, "Okay." And I then forgot she was there. And 3 nights later, she comes into my office and she says, "You're going to buy me dinner." And she holds up this transparency. And I took one look at it and I said, "Where did you find that?" And she takes me back in the Lightroom, and here's that whole roll laid out on the desk, and there is not a picture to the left of it or right of it. And so I'm looking at this thing and I'm saying, oh my God. Because the thing is, not only is it Monica, and not only is it Bill, but if I were a Hollywood director and I had gaffers light the room and I had extras, I could not have possibly made it any better. Everybody's looking to him. The light is coming exactly the right place. So I sent the picture up to Time, and that was in March. And so Time magazine sat on that picture through March, through April, through May, June, July. Finally, at the end of August, Monica went to trial, and Time put it on the cover.